Over on Jaguar Gator 8, a new college football video is out. In this video, we talk about the 1979 LSU Tigers and how they got invited to the Tangerine Bowl under the strangest of circumstances. Click the card in the upper right corner to watch. And join me on ESPN for our Pick'em League and our Eliminator Challenge, where you can test your football knowledge by picking the games of the 2022 season and see how well you stack up against me. Links below. And now, on with our feature presentation. This will come as a surprise to absolutely no one, but the Cincinnati Bengals and the Pittsburgh Steelers do not like each other. Not at all. Ever since the two teams got pitted to be division rivals in the AFC Central back in 1970, with the two teams playing each other over 100 times over the last half century, and with a lot of those games having meaning on the playoff picture and having a national television spotlight, there has been nothing but hatred between the two sides. Neither side likes each other, and I would be here all day if I listed every single example of an incident between the two teams, especially in recent years, like all the dirty hits that took place in the 2017 meeting between the two sides, and the 2015 playoff game, which needs no further explanation. This is one of the most heated rivalries in the NFL, and there has been a lot of bad blood and controversy surrounding this rivalry over the last half century. Heck, I've done quite a few videos on games between these two teams over the years, so if you want to learn more about one of those crazy games, click the card in the upper right corner. But of all the incidents to take place during this heated rivalry, this one from 1993 probably takes the cake. Because even though this is a rivalry, and even though there are going to be some hits that are questionable, usually everything stays in bounds, and everything is game related to some extent. This? Oh man, this was not one of those moments. Because in a 1993 meeting between these two teams, Bengals wide receiver Carl Pickens and Steelers defensive back Rod Woodson got into a heated altercation that left players on the Steelers calling Pickens a racist, left players on the Steelers saying that he stepped way over the line with his behavior, and even left Pickens getting shamed by his own family for his behavior. Because this is the story behind what has to be, without a doubt, the biggest controversy and the worst moment in the over half-century-long history of this crazy rivalry. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, we need some context to understand the two main characters in our story, how the game was going, and what was happening in the pop culture scene that contributed to this to some extent. It's November 7th, 1993. It's week 10 of the NFL season, and we have this AFC Central matchup on our hands at Riverfront Stadium between the Bengals and the Steelers. Now this game means a lot for both of these teams, but for two completely different reasons. For Cincinnati, this has been a nightmare of a season, and was easily looking like it had the potential to be the worst year in franchise history. Through their first 7 games, they were 0-7, being the only winless team in the league. Even though they couldn't make the playoffs barring a few meteor strikes, every game from this point on was absolutely critical until they could get that 0 out of the win column. Because as we hit the halfway point, the odds of becoming the first team in a 16-game season to finish winless were becoming greater and greater. As for Pittsburgh, this game meant a lot for their playoff hopes. They were 4-3, were tied with a few other teams for the final wildcard spot at 4 wins apiece, and were only 1 game back of the Cleveland Browns for first place in the AFC Central. Especially because you can increase your odds of winning the division by getting the tiebreaker and winning the games within your division, this game was big for the Steelers. If they could go on the road and pick up their 5th win in their last 6 games, then not only would they have a ton of momentum on their side, but their odds of playing January football were looking pretty good heading into the halfway point of the year. And it was clear that for this game, the big matchup from an individual perspective was a battle between one of the best young emerging receivers in the game and one of the best cornerbacks in the game. Let's start on the defensive side and talk about this man right here, Rod Woodson. Oddly enough, this is not the first time I've done a video on Woodson, as I talked about how he tore his ACL a few years later in 1995, only to somehow come back in time for the Super Bowl. So if you want to learn more about that remarkable recovery, click the card in the upper right corner. But before Woodson did that, and before Woodson became a Hall of Fame player, Woodson was probably the best cornerback in football. If it wasn't him, it was Deion Sanders, and man, it was awfully close. Entering the 1993 season, he was coming off of 4 straight Pro Bowl appearances and 3 career first-team All-Pro nominations, including one in 1992. But in 1993, he was playing the best football of his career, and was well on pace to not just getting another Pro Bowl nomination and a first-team All-Pro nomination, but a Defensive Player of the Year award. He was that good. Entering this game against the Bengals, he had 7 interceptions through 7 games, and though there was a long way to go, he was on pace to break the record for most interceptions by any individual in a single season. It didn't matter what receiver he was covering. Not only would he blanket them, but he would make the opposing quarterback instantly regret throwing his way and trying to beat him. So for this game, his assignment was to shut down this guy right here, Carl Pickens. Pickens was one of the emerging talents in the sport at the wide receiver position, and on an absolutely disastrously bad Bengals team that truly earned their Bungles nickname, was one of the only bright spots. In 1992, he won Offensive Rookie of the Year, becoming just the second Bengal to ever win this award, alongside Eddie Brown in 1985. Although I should note that he won this award with 26 receptions for 326 yards and a touchdown, making it just about the worst possible field of all time. Still, in 1993, he was looking to build off of that, and he did just that. Entering this game against the Steelers, he had 31 receptions for 411 yards and 4 touchdowns. He already eclipsed all those totals, and he was on pace for 70 catches, well over 900 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Those would be exceptional numbers, and there was no reason why he couldn't do it, especially since in their last game against the Houston Oilers, he had 7 catches for 127 yards. This was going to be his toughest challenge yet. This battle between Rod Woodson and Carl Pickens was what people were watching. The Defensive Player of the Year favorite directly against just about the only good player on the Bengals. When the final whistle sounded, it was the Steelers who came out on top, although it was definitely more of a scare than people thought it would be. Pittsburgh won the game 24-16, and more than doubled Cincinnati's total yardage, outgaining them 390 to 199. However, it wasn't always like this, as the Bengals opened the game with a 16-0 lead, thanks to a touchdown pass by Jay Schrader and a 97-yard pick six by Darrell Williams. Pittsburgh got it together at the end of the first half, and then shut down Cincinnati's offense completely in the second half, and scored the final 24 points of the game to improve to 5-3 and drop the Bengals to 0-8 as we officially hit the halfway point of the season. And with regards to the matchup, in the battle between Rod Woodson and Carl Pickens, the edge went to Woodson in a landslide. Pickens was held to 2 catches for 22 yards and no touchdowns, making this, at the time, his worst game of the season. Yes, he had fewer catches and yards in the season opener against Cleveland, but at least he scored a touchdown in that game. He didn't do so here. And one of those 2 catches wasn't even with Woodson on him. So when it was truly Woodson against Pickens, Woodson won that battle just about every single time. However, it's not so much the fact that Pickens lost the battle on the field with his gameplay that's the real story here. It's that he lost the respect of just about everyone, from players on the Steelers to players on his own team to his own parents, with how he tried to intimidate Rod Woodson and try to get in his head. A lot of great wide receivers are masters of trash talking, but they know that at the end of the day, this is a game, and there are lines that you do not cross. Basically, anything that is out of a person's control, like their skin color, is completely out of bounds. And Carl Pickens did not exactly get the memo on this day. Because what he said to Rod Woodson throughout the course of the game to get him riled up, and even led to Woodson trying to beat up Pickens after the game, even though Woodson's team won, left a ton of people feeling outraged. In 1991, this movie came out. This movie, directed by Spike Lee, is called Jungle Fever, and it was a very successful movie both critically and commercially, with the movie tripling its budget, and with critics generally praising the movie. As for what the movie is about, it deals with a black lawyer having an affair with his white secretary, and receiving disapproval from just about everyone, because their inner city society isn't ready to accept a black man being in a relationship with a white woman. The title of the movie, Jungle Fever, comes from the term given to a black man choosing to pursue an interracial relationship with a white woman. Unfortunately, interracial relationships were still seen in some communities as highly controversial. And between this movie and the incredible episode of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air that came out around the same time, you can truly see that struggle. Now, how does this relate to the Bengals-Steelers game? Well, Rod Woodson was the product of a mixed relationship. His father, James, was African American, and his mother, Linda Jo, was Caucasian. And where Woodson grew up in the town of Fort Wayne, Indiana, this was not exactly accepted, with the KKK even sending packages and making threats to their house. One of these packages threatened Linda Jo with physical harm if she didn't leave James. Growing up in Fort Wayne was painful for the Woodson family. Woodson said that white people would call him things like half-breed, zebra, and the N-word, and that black people would call him things like yellow boy, white boy, or mixed breed. Just truly awful and sickening stuff. And in 1992, Woodson married Nikki, who is white, and who he is still with to this day 30 years later. So he was in a mixed relationship. For very obvious reasons, this was a highly sensitive subject to Woodson. He dealt with racism his whole life, and watched his parents struggle to make ends meet and struggle to live their lives while living in a community full of racists. Which is why when Carl Pickens, during this game, repeatedly and frequently called Woodson Jungle Fever and shouted things at him during the game, like, "Hey, you have jungle fever," Woodson thought that this crossed a big line. And this isn't just an allegation where Woodson thought he said one thing, but Pickens really said another, or didn't say anything at all, and there isn't any other evidence to back up the claim despite a bunch of witnesses and cameras. Not only did multiple Steeler players say that Pickens said it, but Pickens himself even said that he said it. So there was no debate as to the content of this trash talk. And not only was Woodson furious about this, but he was so furious that after the game, he threw a punch at Pickens and tried to fight him, though this took place off camera. Keep in mind that Woodson isn't exactly a guy known for losing his cool and starting fights. So for this to enrage him enough, after his team won the game, tells you everything you need to know. And just about everyone involved agreed that there was no excuse for what Pickens did. None whatsoever. As Woodson said, he crossed the line. That's why I did what I did. What was said was outside of football. I was upset. A lot of talking goes on in football, but what was said doesn't go on very much. Woodson's teammate, cornerback DJ Johnson, said if you want to talk basic football the whole game, fine. But that personal stuff is uncalled for. Even on the Bengals, rookie linebacker Steve Tovar, though he didn't condone Woodson trying to fight Pickens, said that just because he was Pickens' teammate didn't mean that he was defending what he did. As Tovar said, "I don't think it's good judgment to talk about somebody's parents, and I'm not condoning what Carl said, if he really said that." Head coach Bill Cowher said that what Pickens did was so despicable that even though Woodson took a swing at Pickens after the game, that he wasn't going to take any action, saying, "I don't think Rod would want me to do that." And it was so bad that even Pickens' parents were ashamed of him, which is when you know that you screwed up big time and that you really messed up. Pickens initially didn't apologize or do anything like that, but his tune changed completely after hearing the voices of his parents. As Pickens said after his parents found out the news, "It wasn't too easy to go home after that. My dad was kind of upset about it. My mother was disappointed. When I saw that they were hurt, I realized I made a terrible mistake." At that moment, Pickens said that he regretted his actions and wanted to talk with Woodson to apologize. So at least he learned his lesson, even if it was late and even if it did cross a major line. The Steelers-Bengals rivalry is an intense one, and that goes without saying. But with every rivalry, there are certain things that you just do not do, and there are certain lines that you just do not cross. Carl Pickens not only crossed that line with his racially motivated comments toward Rod Woodson during the game, but he took an Olympic record-sized long jump over that line, because that's how far it was. When trash talk gets personal and crosses into that territory, that is never a good sign, and it should never be about skin color. Carl Pickens was an amazing receiver. He was a two-time Pro Bowler, had 4 seasons with over 1,000 yards receiving, and led the NFL in 1995 with 17 receiving touchdowns. But this was not his finest moment. Not by a long shot. Because on this day in 1993, Despite all the other incidents that happened, and have happened during this rivalry, he had the biggest controversy and the worst moment of them all. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at Jaguar Gator 9. To see college football videos, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.